All right. Well, according to all of my screens, we are live broadcasting to a dozen people, presumably, maybe even less. Who's to say? But this is a game where it's a long tail game. This is content that we're going to store, record, and stick on YouTube, and you can watch it later. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Biotech Recruiting Chat. I am joined by my most recent friend. I'm just going to put it that way. Chris Tamburrini and I did a podcast together a week ago, and it was so much fun that I said, let's flip the script. Let's do it the other way. You show up on my show. And that's exactly what we did. So meet Chris Tamburrini of Ronan Vance. He's done all sorts of biotech hiring and recruiting. So Chris, do us all a favor and give us the 60-second spiel on Chris.
Yeah, well, James, it's a pleasure to be here. It's nice that the script is reversed because usually I'm the one conducting some of these recorded content interviews. But yeah, to give you some background, I mean, like I've been in biotech recruiting really my entire career, which goes back to 2007. So if my math is correct, about 16 years. And, I started off on the agency side, and I started off on a whim, right? It was kind of like I went to school for the life sciences. I knew I didn't want to go work into a laboratory. I ended up taking an internship in advertising sales. And I said, well, I don't want to do advertising sales, but I do like working with people. And I like the idea of, kind of hunting, if you will. That was fun to me. And then I came across agency recruiting, which I didn't really even know was a thing at the time. And it was specifically for biotech recruiting. I said, well, that's perfect. I have a life sciences degree. Mm-hmm. I am interested in some sort of business development or sales type career. And the rest was history, right? So I took this gig. It was like an entry level associate recruiter gig at this company, which ultimately got acquired by Biotech. So I spent about my first 9 years at Biotech placing contractors, essentially, mm-hmm. Mid-level contractors, people with 2 to 6 years experience, and we did some perm work. And then I went to another agency shortly after that, where I spent about half the time placing contractors and consultants, and then the other half the time there placing people on a direct hire basis. And I was looking at candidates who had more and more experience, and so I became more interested in gravitating my efforts towards, direct hire, senior level placements. Again, all within biotech and pharma, and really all within the greater Boston area.
Yeah.
So that's my 60 seconds.
There you go. So does having a background in life science give you an advantage of some sort? I mean, how do you leverage that, or do you even leverage that? Or is it just kind of a nice to check the box and it helps you walk in the door?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. It's a nice thing to have. It helped me earlier on in my career because I could speak shop with, cell biologists and molecular biologists a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I will say I learned most of what I know about biotech and pharma on the recruiting job. So, you don't have to have a life sciences background. It's certainly helpful. It doesn't hurt. But if I'm going to be totally honest, which I always am, didn't need it. But I'm happy I did it, and I'm happy it's part of my background.
So over time, so you have a nice kind of longitudinal experience set to say, look, in 2020 or 2007, we were looking for X and Y and Z, and today we're looking for this thing. How have things changed in terms of what businesses are looking for, how they're evaluating talent? Think not just in terms of like the hard skills. Obviously, there's a whole new slew of hard skills that have to show up, machine learning, stuff like that. But my suspicion is that the kind of person or the way companies think about the kind of person they're hiring has evolved as well. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I got a ton of thoughts on that. And so I have to be a little careful here because I was back in 2007, 2008, I was placing different types of individuals than I'm placing now.
Sure.
Based on experience. But I will say there has been a very conscious shift, and I've talked about this on some of my podcasts, into really creating a culture versus just having scientific expertise, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think if I were to put this broadly from my perspective, when I started recruiting, it was, okay, we're going to put, 80% of the emphasis on this person's technical expertise, how much they know, what they've accomplished. And I think it's shifted probably more towards a 50-50 where,
Mm,
yeah, you need that technical experience, but we also need you to be a really good team player. And we also need you to be really adaptable. And we also want you to think about more than just yourself going into this.
mhm.
Um, and I think, part of that has to do with the fact that I started off recruiting people who were more junior in their career, and the technical expertise was probably more critical. Um, and then in the latter part of my career, where I'm placing more, leadership and executive talent, that people piece or culture piece is very important.
Yeah.
But having that said, I still think that the biotech and pharma landscape, especially in small to mid-sized companies, has shifted to really put an emphasis on an internal culture.
Yeah. How do you, okay, so if we're moving to like a, and and obviously these numbers are bullshit and I get that. I'm fine with playing around with 50-50 splits because it makes
Yeah,
sense, right? It's an even weight sort of situation.
right.
And I think about that. It's like, okay, so if you're evaluating technical skills and you're evaluating your culture fit, for lack of a better term, I'll go to your career site, I'll go to your job postings, and it's all about the technical skills. Like maybe 10% of it's about the culture. So, how are companies talking about their culture or thinking about or evaluating people for that culture? Is it as simple as, hey, so tell me about are you much of a team player? Like the kind of bulk BS kind of interview questions that everybody kind of has a pat answer around. That's just, oh, hey, tell me about your weakest point, right? Stuff, the junk like that. Or is there another way they're thinking about and using that cultural ideal to say this person's likely going to be a strong player down the road?
This is a tough one, and this is one of these things in recruiting that I think will always be somewhat mysterious.
Mm,
And I also think that there's a huge element of it that is not data dependent. I know that we're in a very data driven field, but this is one of those things where it comes down to interpersonal chemistry,
mhm,
where how do you get along with someone in a very short amount of time. You meet somebody for half an hour, they come on site, they meet you for an hour, you have lunch with them, you have a conversation with them, and you kind of get this gut feeling. And either the feeling that you get from that person is going to align with what you think they need to be, or it's
mhm.
not going to align. And that's one of these things that's super hard to quantify. And I'm sure there's a lot of studies on how to better quantify or better categorize what I'm trying to say. But a lot of it is based on gut. But there's also some pieces of it that are based on examples, right?
Yeah.
Like what have you done in the
Mhm.
past to develop a junior level scientist that came in and get them promoted to that
Okay,
principal
that's good.
scientist or associate director level. So there are some quantifiable items, and I think the way that you tell that story and the examples you can give throughout an interview process is certainly a key part of it, right? So yeah, there's some gut, there's some chemistry there,
Mhm.
but I think you want to have the person rely back and be able to explain stories that showcase their ability to promote those around them, or to develop others, or
Mhm.
to be selfless in certain ways,
Yeah.
or to take initiative in certain ways. I mean, there's so many different avenues, James. I think we could talk about this topic for a long time because
Mhm.
it's not black and white.
And I think it's telling, if you don't mind taking a minute here to say,
Yeah.
when the example you used of, hey, tell me about a time in which you figured out how to develop and promote someone else. That's a question that doesn't say, are you a team player, which of course is a joke answer or a joke question, but to say,
Yes, I am.
yeah, exactly. It's like but how do you talk about a time in which you gave of yourself, you gave your time, you gave your energy, and that to me is it's not your culture is not defined by what you say or what you put in the wall, but it's where you spend your time, it's where you spend your resources and money. That defines your culture. And so questions like, tell me about a time in which you've actually developed someone, you've spent the time and energy to develop them and get them promoted. That's more telling about what the culture is all about, what that person's really capable of doing and how they approach things. So I like the question. I like the approach there.
Yeah, I
So
think
go ahead.
I was going to say, just to add on, I think another big one is I think a lot of employers also want to hear about how people, face adversity in their careers and how they kind of overcame that. And that maybe sounds like a generic question, but if the person is coming up with a legitimate example and they're able to talk through it and talk about the struggles they had through that adversity
Mhm.
and you know, what the outcomes were, whether they were good or bad or neutral. And I think coming in there with a level of, humility and honesty also speaks to a lot of the clients that I work with, at least. So
Yeah.
that's just kind of another maybe qualifiable aspect when it comes to getting a fit for culture.
Yeah. And in your role, how much time do you spend talking to the client and to the prospect, trying to understand their approach to culture, what they're looking for, those soft skills or those unstated implicit expectations? You're in a role where you really can connect dots and say, yeah, you need a biochemist. I know 20 of them. But which one do I bring you? And how do I say, oh, it's the one who takes the initiative, or the one who's super team player, the one who's the leader, or the one who's super whatever it is, right? How do you spend time kind of connecting that dot, or is it purely about hard skills?
No, I do spend time connecting that dot. And that's one of the things that, when I'm working with a hiring team, I'll say to them is, hey, Mr. Hiring Manager, Mrs. Hiring Manager, um, it's great to have a nice technical list here of things that we need. But if it's a new client and I don't know them well, I do request some time to get to know them well and be like, listen, I need to come on site. I want to meet with some of your team members. I want to meet with you. I want to get a better feel, that gut feel that we were just talking. I want to get a better feel for how things work at your company and what type of individuals might fit into that team, in addition to some of those technical specs that are important. And so yeah, for a client that I've worked with for say, a year, it's easier for me to make that match because I've placed people there before and I have learned what that hiring team likes.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a newer client for me, that might take a little bit more time and maybe we'll get lucky and we'll find somebody who just happens to be a fit. But it will be probably a little more challenging for me to be able to evaluate that without me having done things like gone on site, met with the team, met with different stakeholders in the position or in the company rather. So
Would it
yeah,
be
there's effort and time, conscious effort, time spending to get to understand their culture and kind of what they're looking for beyond just technical.
sounds good. So would there be value to you in how you are connecting those dots if a company spent more time thinking about how to describe their culture, how to document their culture, if it's 50% of why they're choosing someone, it sure feels like there's a gap in terms of how much they're talking about those ideas.
Yeah, the answer is yes. I mean, in a lot of ways, if a company has a really strong brand or a really solid idea of what their culture kind of looks like, it makes my job a lot easier.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it's I'm not going to say cheating, right? But it's like it makes my ability to recruit and promote that company that much easier because the company has put some effort and some strategy around it versus me simply saying that they've put some effort and strategy around it, right? Or that they actually focus on culture. Like, what have they done from an informational standpoint? And what have they put out into the market that's going to help that candidate validate some of the things that I'm saying? And then here's an older piece to it too. And I think you and I spoke with this before is, okay, so I'm going to say something about the company and their culture. The company is going to say something about their company and culture. But then how do we actually know it's real, right? And so, a lot of that comes with the candidate getting to know the hiring team and the other stakeholders. And that generally can happen throughout an interview process. And there's all different parts of that process, right? It's not just what happens at the meeting. It's how is the meeting set up? How is the meeting debriefed upon? What types of feedback did that candidate get? So there's a lot of different variables there. And then let's just call a spade here. That candidate really isn't going to know what that
Yeah.
culture is like until they get there and they've been there for 3 to 6 months. And we hope that the culture is really consistent with how it was marketed
Yeah.
and displayed.
If I'm distracted, it's because I'm mentally changing my career, what my business website from documenting and telling your stories is a lot like recruiting and cheating. So that's a great, it's a strong line. I like it a lot.
Good, good.
Uh, so kind of changing gears slightly. In your role, how do you spend time finding, engaging, connecting with great talent. And I don't want you giving away your professional secrets. Obviously, if you have particular fishing holes, as it were, that no one else knows about, don't give away too much. But like, what is your process? If I'm a biochemist and I would like to kind of be heard from you, or I want to engage with someone like you, where do I go and how do I kind of get your attention?
So you wanted me to give them an example from the candidate's perspective.
Well, from your what is your process for finding great talent? If
Yeah.
you're showing up with a great book, you're always growing your book, you're always developing your book. What is your process
Yeah.
for doing that?
Well, I mean, I have a notebook right here, and I have every candidate that I've ever needed on this list right now. No, I'm kidding.
The SWAT team just shows up from
yeah.
four other companies going, "It's my book. I want that."
No, that was a horrible joke. But no, I mean, I think it's a multifaceted approach, right? And I'll tell you the same thing that I'll tell any hiring team, and it comes down to a few different things, right? There is a network of people that I have the luxury of knowing because I've been in the industry for 16 years, right? So there's an innate network of people that I know that I can ask for referrals. Like, who do you know that has XYZ skill set, who you think has good character, et cetera, right? So that's the first place that I'm always going to go. Okay. And then there's a variety of online resources that we have at our fingertips nowadays that make it much easier on paper to find people, right? So that probably number one source that we all know that we're live on right now is LinkedIn, right? So there's a big database there of people.
Hold on. Before I get there, so that's a great opening for me to say, do biotech talent hang out on LinkedIn? That is kind of an open question, it seems like, in biotech, where scientific, medical professionals, they tend to shy away from LinkedIn. In your experience, are they actually on there?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a large majority. I mean, not everyone is on there, but I would say that the majority of individuals are on LinkedIn. I mean, there's certainly individuals that are not, and those ones are harder to find, obviously, but they're still findable through referrals. But yeah, yes, I think that I don't have any numbers, but I would say the majority.
You find success with it.
Yes. Okay. I mean, it's a great, and here's another thing, right? If there's somebody on LinkedIn who maybe you talk to and you engage, they might not be a fit, but if you engage with them respectfully, they might offer some nice referrals of people that aren't on LinkedIn. So, that's another resource. And it's just, so it's really referrals from a network that I know. It's active outreach through mediums like LinkedIn. There's other mediums as well. There's networking events that you go to that are industry specific where you find people. It's a multitude of mediums. It's not one answer, but hopefully that gives you some direction for your question. If you're a candidate, where do you want to be? Yeah, you want to be networking. You want to be on LinkedIn. You want to know people in your industry who can make introductions for you.
Gotcha. So to kind of wrap this up, if you had a magic wand and I handed you a magic wand, I say you get to change one or two things in the entire recruiting ecosystem, whether that's on the candidate side or the company side, what are the things that you think need to be changed the most?
That's a tough one. Recruiting, I don't think will ever be a perfect science. In fact, I know it will never be a perfect science. I think what it comes down to is, if you're a hiring team, right? And I think this has come a really long way from where it was in the past, but every once in a while you'll come across a hiring team that there'll be, one or two key decision makers, but there'll be a team of, 4 or 5 other stakeholders. And there might not be, going into a search or going into opening position, there might not be a well-tuned alignment to what they're looking for, both culturally and technically. Mm-hmm. So, having that be kind of a prerequisite for any hiring team, I think would be, one of the things I would change with a magic wand. And I'd say that's improved, over the years as talent acquisition teams have become more sophisticated. But the other thing I think would be, and this isn't really to just play into what you do, James, I think having a strong, brand to make a recruiter's job easy, whether it's an internal recruiter or an agency recruiter. Having a really strong, brand and kind of what that company is trying to achieve, both scientifically and culturally, I think could be, very helpful. When I say a strong brand, I don't mean like some sort of like fictitious like unicorn land that any candidate can come to and be, happy every single day. Just painting a real picture, saying, listen, here's what we offer for growth. Here's what we offer for culture. Here's what we offer scientifically. This either kind of fits where you want to be or it doesn't. And so, but having that be a very transparent message out to the market, I think would probably be something that, I'd probably change as well. And there's a lot of companies that do that well. And there's a lot of companies that are, maybe need to work on that just based on the fact that they're newer or they don't have the internal expertise. So those are a couple of things just right off the top of my head. I mean, I didn't prepare for that answer, so I'm just kind of
that's right.
Gunslinger here.
That's the best way to do it. We're professionals. We roll it live. It's going to be good. Yeah. Let me kind of add on to that, or kind of ask one more kind of follow up on that. See, to me, I'm looking at all these biotech websites, and they all say the same things. They talk about the same stuff. Every once in a while, you get a nice, interesting design or a nice visual flair. Every once in a while, some personality comes through in the language. But how can biotechs differentiate themselves? If you've got 1,000 biotechs in Boston, Cambridge alone, I can't tell the difference of them short of, since most of them don't have a drug out in the market, most of them don't have a proven platform or a proven kind of, track record yet. They all have great ideas. They're all inventing and changing the world. What could a biotech be doing to stand out, to kind of be crystal clear about this is what we do, this is what we offer, this is why you should work here?
Well, I think if I had the answer to that, I would be in talent branding.
I'm just asking for help is what I'm doing here. Chris, come on, give me a life raft here.
No, I think, that's.
Well, think about your candidates. How about this? Let's think about the people you're trying to represent and explain, this is why you should be super excited about this company. In fact, I'm going to get super granular right here. I want you to tell me, if you can, the things you talk about to that candidate face to face that do not show up on the career site of the job posting. What are the ideas that those candidates generally get most excited by? That to me feels like there's a gap we could fill, and we could start to help companies kind of differentiate themselves and stand out in the market.
Yeah, I think a big piece of it is transparency, right? Like, I think people want to hear bad things too, or maybe not things that are bad, but maybe things that aren't all great, right? Yeah. I think the more realistic I think employers are with their candidates, the better things are going to be, because it shows a level of integrity, right? Like you said, I think a lot of companies, they kind of go after the same thing. They say, we have the coolest science, we have the most interesting science, we have the most novel science, and we also have a great culture, and we do happy hours, every Thursday. Yeah. And then we're going to post it because we like to have a good time. I think that's nice, but I don't really think candidates care about that. I think candidates care about integrity, and they care about transparency, and they want to have a realistic idea of what they're walking into, both positive and both negative and constructive, right? Because there's no organization that is 100% perfect. So, I would think it would be interesting if there was an employer or a company that posted information about their company on their website, said, here are all the great things about working here. Here are all the not so great things about working here. Here's what we're trying to do to work on that. And by the way, we actually have some really novel science, and we're very patient-centric, and we're extremely passionate about this particular disease area. And here's why. And here's who we've hired to help attack that disease area from a scientific and a clinical perspective. Yeah. So I think it needs to be an all-encompassing, not just we have great science, we have a great culture. It's going to be like, we have great science. Here's why. Here's what we've brought on to prove that. We have really good things about our culture. Here's what we're working on about our company. We also realize that we have multiple competitors in this space, and that we're one of 10 companies going after this disease area, and we understand that's going to be a struggle. So that's my style. I don't know if that's everyone's style, but
well, I'm not talking to anybody else. I'm talking to you. That's all I want to know. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah. That's perfect. No, that's super helpful. And it's nice to know. Look, I tend to live in a world of big messages and job postings and career sites and broad macro messaging. I have this suspicion that some people like you are there to kind of close that gap to say, look, this is the big message, but this is what it's going to look like to you. This is what I've seen. This is the reality. This is the day to day beyond the big hypey message, beyond the tagline. And so I think that kind of bears out. And it's interesting to hear how you kind of perceive it and how you think of, would me doing my job better make it easier for you to have less of a gap to close and say, okay, here, you already know how they're different. Let me just answer questions. And it sounds like that would be super helpful for you.
Totally. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, there we go. And a perfect place to end this conversation. Chris, where can people find you, and tell everybody about your podcast?
You could find me on LinkedIn.
What? On LinkedIn, you say?
Find me on LinkedIn. Chris Tamburrini, Ronan Advanced Clinical and Scientific Search. And then, I do a podcast. I usually release, 1 to 2 episodes a month, sometimes more, sometimes less. And I also post that on LinkedIn and also Spotify for podcasters. So if you go on Spotify, you can find Talent Therapy, which is the name of the podcast there.
There you go. Love it. And I love the name. I wish I had thought of it first. So there you go. That's the ultimate compliment is, damn, I wish I had thought of that.
Thank you.
All right, Chris, thanks for being here. Everybody for listening, whether it's live or recorded, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you, James.
Bye.